And we return to Our American Stories. Up next, the story of how a scrappy sports league called the NFL became, well, the NFL we know today. Here's our own Monty Montgomery to get us started.
Football is a pretty big deal.
Pressure comes, step it up, looking, throwing deep downfield. It is picked up by the Lions, intercepted, coming back the other way. Ifatu Melifonwu, this is going to be over.
In so many ways, the NFL has just grown into a behemoth really unlike any other. No other sport can touch it. I'm talking other sports that are popular, like baseball and basketball. And as popular as they are, they don't come close to $15 billion in annual revenues. And they said they'd like to go to $25 billion.
That's John Eisenberg. He's the author of the book The League, which talks about the early days of football. Let's get back into the story.
It has become year-round. You could turn on a sports talk show any time of year, and they'll be talking football.
I think America is the land of second chances, except for when it comes to this dude, Mr. Jabba the Hutt, you fat slovenly. That's what he was with the Oakland Raiders.
What did the Panthers do at quarterback? What are the Cowboys doing at receiver? It's never stops, even though they only played from September to December and then the playoffs. They are just really, really shrewd at continuing the narrative with the draft.
The Kansas City Chiefs select Patrick Mahomes, the second.
The six-time world champion New England Patriots select Mac Jones.
The country comes to a halt on Sundays and Mondays, and it all culminates, yes, with the Super Bowl, which is a secular holiday. The football faucet never turns off in America. And the early days of the NFL were just so different. It was struggling. And I think most people today would look at the NFL and say, how in the world is that possible? How in the world did we get from point A to point B? It was founded in 1920 in Canton, Ohio at a Hupmobile dealership.
Ralph Hay, who owned the Canton Bulldogs, he called a meeting for Canton, Ohio in his automobile showroom. And of course, there weren't enough chairs for everybody, so we sat around on the running boards of the Hupmobile cars. To become a member of this football league, and it was $100, and it was worth it.
That's George Halas, who was one of the few original men to take that $100 bet on the NFL in an era when the sport wasn't even on the radar of most Americans.
Baseball was far and away the most popular American sport. Number one sport would have been Major League Baseball. Number two, probably minor league baseball. It was very much the national pastime, very popular, played in large cities, small towns, and Babe Ruth in his glory and Ty Cobb. Very much sort of a cultural phenomenon, not unlike football today. Baseball was extremely popular. The college football was becoming very, very popular. They built some stadiums, and people were fascinated with it, but it was an amateur enterprise. Football, back in the early days, was seen more than anything else as a good way to take young men and grow them from boys into men. All right, it was considered sort of a rite of manhood, a rite of passage. Put them on the field, teach them to get hit and deal with pain and be tough and grow up a little bit. All right, it was considered
a game described by one turn-of-the-century critic as crude and barbaric, with little chance of survival.
The idea of paying someone to do this, a lot of society was horrified by the idea. Why take something that was so important for our young boys who are being taught how to become better men? Why take something like that and ruin it, spoil it with pay? That was not the point. So very early on, the college coaches were very much against it. Fielding Yost, a famous coach at the University of Michigan, gave a famous speech where he said, we have to root this out, this pro football scourge. We do not want to go down this road. This could ruin football. You got out of college. Why in the world would you go do that? You would use your brain, go get into some respectable line of work. Football, professional football, was not considered a respectable line of work for the first years of the NFL. A lot of the guys that played in the NFL really had no choice. They didn't have many other options, and they were happy just to do that for a few extra bucks. And so pro football had a lot going against it, and it showed in the quality of the league and the teams. It was very much a fly-by-night enterprise. In the beginning, any sort of sporting businessman that wanted to bring a team, if he had a couple $100 and had a place to put a team, they would take you. Tim Mara sort of stumbled into a meeting with the NFL, a couple of NFL guys that were trying to start a team in New York, and basically was talked into, he wasn't even invited to the meeting. He just showed up. And they said, well, you can have a franchise for $500. And he said, well, at that price, why not?
That team, the New York Giants. Other teams had more industrial roots.
When George Halas started the Decatur, Illinois Staleys, it was a starch company, 80 Staley Company, playing football was part of the job. They recruited them to play football and work, in the factory. Playing football was sort of a bonus.
Well, we had a great season in 1920 because we were the first team to practice every day. They all had jobs with the Staley Company, and I taught Mr. Staley in getting the players 2 hours a day off for practice.
A lot of them worked for maybe these factories that owned a team, or they worked somewhere else. No, there was no money on the table. Some of the games, the crowd, they would pass a hat and ask the fans to put in $1 or a quarter or whatever they could so the players could get paid. And some teams played in little stadiums, high school stadiums, a couple thousand fans. Some teams played in public parks. The champion of the league, the Green Bay Packers, played in a high school stadium, and with no restrooms, by the way. So you were lucky to get a couple thousand fans to a game. Players could jump from team to team. And what's really interesting about early football is how different the game itself was. The ball was rounder, much rounder, and there was not much passing. The game was just sort of a scrum, a muddy scrum. Most of the plays involved just a back plunging into the line, which was just a tangle of arms and legs, and really people just wrestling there at the line of scrimmage. And, they had little pads on, and they wore what they didn't even call them uniforms, they called them sweaters, team sweaters. And sometimes the teams had the same color sweaters. And so the game was almost indecipherable. Not much happened. Punting was a much bigger deal than passing. There was very little scoring. It wouldn't be surprising to see a game with a final score of 6-2, a safety and a touchdown and a missed extra point. It was an odd sport. Not that many people wanted to see it. It didn't draw that many people because it wasn't very exciting.
You ever think a franchise would be worth $1 million, perhaps?
No, I didn't, Jack. I always had to go to the bank to be able and get a loan to be able to start the team off for the following season. And it wasn't until 1959. It was the first year that I didn't have to go to the bank.
George,
So,
God bless you.
To catch the rest of this remarkable story, go to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.